Week you told the Dáil that as a result of your proposed cuts to the pandemic unemployment payment of €350, nobody would be worse off than they were before the pandemic. That isn't true, Taoiseach, is it? You have played with words in order to hide the reality of the cuts that you are planning. But the department's press statement last Friday and updated today is clear. It says, quote, "For those whose prior employment reported today." I'll give you a couple of examples. Emma was working 2 days a week for 8 hours on €12 an hour and has one child. She was previously earning €192 a week from her job and got €225.50 per week in job seekers transitional payment. So her total weekly income was €17.50 a week. When she lost her job due to the pandemic, this was reduced to €350 on the PUP. From the end of June, however, her PUP will be cut to €203, and she'll have to move back to the job seekers transitional payment and will therefore be will be reduced to €239, a drop from €401 a week to €200. Cruel cut that will mean that she can't afford to pay her rent through no fault of her own. Take John, who was previously working 2 days a week on minimum wage, earning €161.60 a week. He was also getting €130 in job allowance for the 3 days a week he wasn't working. His total income was just over €290. Now you're cutting him to €203, a drop of his income of about a third. There's many, many more examples that could be given, including students who work part-time in January and February, full-time at this time of year, and rely on that income to pay their way through college, seasonal workers who work part-time in the off-season through no choice of their own and rely on the income that they make in the summer working full-time. Taoiseach, will you correct the record, accept that many people will be worse off if you proceed with the cut to the pandemic unemployment payment, and will you therefore agree to withdraw the cut?
Thanks, Deputy. I'd have to examine the individual examples that you give, but what I said was that nobody would be worse off than they were before the pandemic as a consequence of the decision being made. I didn't say that nobody would be worse off than they were before the pandemic. Lots of people are worse off than they were before the pandemic. Anyone who was earning, anyone who's lost their job, for example, or most people have lost their jobs, sadly are worse off than they were before the pandemic, because the average weekly wage in Ireland in the first quarter of this year was €800 a week. We were seeing some very significant real and welcome wage growth in Ireland before the pandemic, up to €800 a week. So that average person who was earning €800 a week who lost their job is now on €350 a week. So yes, lots of people are much worse off than they were before the pandemic hit, and that would be true of people on the wage subsidy as well. The solution isn't welfare, the solution is jobs. Getting people back to work and into work so they can earn much more than ever can be offered in the welfare system. There are people who were on the pandemic unemployment payment who would be better off on regular welfare payments. For example, the one parent family payment, job seekers, particularly if they have dependents, and the option is there for them to apply for that.
Taoiseach, I'll quote your words from last week in the Dáil. "The changes we are making tomorrow will ensure that those young people," referring to young people who have been working part-time before the crisis, "those young people are no worse off than they were before the pandemic." That is the impression that you gave people. You suggested that those people would not lose out as a result of your cuts, and that's not the truth. The truth is a lot of people are going to be worse off as a consequence of your government decision. Some people will lose up to 50% of their income. An incredibly cruel cut for you to be making, particularly in terms of the context of food poverty and everything else. This is in line with your kicking down with the welfare cheats cheat us all based on bogus figures, based on spin. It's right populism, going after bogeymen of people who supposedly won the lotto, who obviously haven't, preparing the way to cut PUP for everybody. You should withdraw the cut, Taoiseach.
I don't have the full transcript in front of me, but I think, if I remember correctly, you were specifically referring to students and young people working part-time, not the kind of examples that you gave there. On the welfare system, we have the same welfare system as we had before the pandemic. Internationally and independently adjudicated to be one of the more generous welfare systems in the world, and one of the welfare systems in the world that is most successful at redistributing income. That welfare system has not been cut. We layered on top of that something new, which was the pandemic unemployment payment.
All right, thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Noel.